Hello. Welcome. Tuesday, at least where I'm located. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. The United States of America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee. Welcome to the people who are here with good intentions, who want to learn, educate one another. I'm not solely in this role. I learn a shit ton from the people here. Maybe even more I learn from you than you learn from me. Welcome to you if you want to create a better world than the one that we are existing in. Building systems outside of these oppressive ones where we see the humanity in one another. Namaste, team. If you are here looking to exacerbate these hierarchies of human dignity, you are here with ill intent, looking to dehumanize others, fuck you, and a curse be upon you. Okay, we're off. Hello, Aliana. Bunso. First. The Blazer, thank you. I know, I'm a sucker for business casual, I have to say. I know that, suits represent a lot of class. But, how about we, can we take it back? Can we reclaim this? Anarchist suits? Or are suits inherently representative of oppression? I guess this is up for debate. We shall see if we're able to reclaim them. I'm not working class, so I wear a suit. I mean, even if, I wouldn't say you're part of, the capitalist class. So, even though you have said of, not working for money, of still, not being part of the 1%, people who own all of these modes of industry, I think that still makes you part of the working class. Modes, means of production, I guess I could say, but all of these industries. There's a bird tapping at the window. Hi. Oh. What do you want, little friend? Make money from buying and selling. Birdie. I kind of want to open it to see what it's about. Maybe I will. We'll probably make it fly away, though. Please hold. Yep, it flew away. We have so many birds around here. Hi! Did you know that there were birds? The cats are loving that, being able to watch the birds. Bird watching, if you will. Hello, Turbomb, welcome. You saw hummingbird today? I love that. Now you can see Juniper getting a drink. I don't know if you can hear it. Hearing her drink is so cute. It's just this little lapping. Hummingbirds are supposed to be good luck. I mean, I think most wildlife is. Birds, I think, in a lot of traditions, metaphysical senses, represent change, messengers. Yeah, informing you that you have incoming messages. I don't know what that means, or if that's true, if that's what's happening. I'm open to that. It was flying 2 feet in front of me. Wow. I love that. I really love birds. I don't want to be swarmed by them, but I'm also not an air sign. I feel like a lot of air signs really resonate with birds, but I've always loved birds of like representing freedom, and they're so beautiful. Also, feathers, cunty. They're like these dinosaurs. We still get a lot of crows around here, which I love. I haven't seen those ravens for a while, and it makes me wonder if I missed my chance to befriend them. Here's a PSA. If you happen to see ravens around, don't miss your chance to befriend them. Saw a dragonfly yesterday during stream on a windy day, and it wouldn't even flap its wings. Whoa. Yeah, what is that like? Just existing in this completely different plane. You're like, I guess I have to deal with all of these elements. Ensure signal notifications are off. They are. My brother has a bird feeder with a camera. Oh, I love that. Teach ravens to steal money. I know. Yeah, and they're very smart. Crows are also very smart. They steal shiny things. They show a lot of loyalty, like they remember faces. So I don't know if they like come back if they would remember me. I would hope so. I've like tried to give them offerings of like shiny things and food. Because I'm like, please, what do I have to learn from you? Well, maybe that's it. Of like taking like actually honoring them when they're around more, not missing chances as they pop up. Chain goes hard. Thank you. Um, More recently, I've been like a little bit stripped back with the stuff that I'm wearing, just especially with it being so hot. I can just be like, ugh, I don't care. Clothes can be annoying, but I also love clothes. Today is one of these days where I'm like, well, I'll be extra because I like that. All right. So, what I've planned for today, we do have a humorous video that we'll be starting off with. I did want to get to this video that I've been wanting to watch with Arundhati Roy because I have a crush on her. She's an incredible writer and activist who has always been outspoken against the corruption and um, the the caste system in India. And so she is talking about the cockroach movement that I would like to discuss, especially with this particular video from Democracy Now! Called Cockroach Democracy. I would like to continue to talk about what we even think democracy is, if it is possible to have true democracies, what, depending on what the definition is, what we are thinking of it as. Um, because a lot of the time people may think it is just having a say in society. Then we're going to be getting into more anarchist thoughts. We're going to be getting into leftist definitions. This video by Zachap, I am excited to see because it is called What is Leftism? Who is a leftist? And I love this. I love this discussion. We need to be talking about it. Democracy is weird. It's a system that allows evil to have a say. Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of like anarchists can be coming from, of saying that like it's still creating hierarchies, and there are some people who have more say or more consent, and that means it is not equal. So when people think of democracy, they tend to think of equality, and that is not really what it means a lot of the time. in my opinion, because equality is like we all have equal opportunity in resources and a say in what our lives look like. So we'll be getting into that, this video from Andrewism. And then we're going to finish the video that we started on Hecate and then get into the second scene of Act 2 of Macbeth. Sound good? Alright, for our humorous video today, this is by InfoWars and The Onion, because InfoWars was bought by The Onion. Incredible, I love that. And it is, I think it's based off of Steve Bannon's podcast that he had. I've not seen anything that Steve Bannon has created. I'm pretty proud to say that. And so I'm just guessing because he kind of, that's what all the signs are pointing to, but look at look at him. We'll also be talking about like how you were mentioning yesterday, Bunso, of how like gun ownership is not exclusive to right-wing thought. So we'll dive into that a bit, see what this video has in store for us, and see if we get into that kind of discussion, because conservative heroes fighting for the Second Amendment. I'm guessing this will be all about glorifying like mass shootings is what, if we're talking about conservatives. Pardon? Of talking just gun ownership, it is not exclusive to right-wing people and thought. Especially when people experience more marginalization, it often is a necessity for protection. All right. The lighting is so dark on this. I don't know what that's about, but let's see.
The Second Amendment.
Oh, it was coming up. The lighting was coming up.
God-given right to own and operate firearms without government interference. America's forefathers made sure it was the very first thing in the Constitution for a reason. Now, some days it feels like the Second Amendment is the only thing standing between a functioning society and some kind of woke communist nightmare. It's what separates law-abiding American citizens from the animals and criminals and demons and bugs. Just like anything good in this life, the Second Amendment is under attack. But thank God a new generation of brave young Americans is fighting for our right to bear arms and so much more. My guest today is a rising star of the conservative movement, and rightfully so. I've been impressed by the clear-headed and unapologetic celebration of gun ownership and American Christian values. He stood his ground, made liberals furious, and the best part? He's only 8 years old.
Oh,
Lucas
no.
Riley, welcome to the Jim Haggerty Show.
Hi.
For 35 years, I was part of the problem.
Gross.
A mouthpiece for the mainstream media, spewing their lies and kissing their feet, all while they turn me into something I'm not. But now I'm free of my corporate shackles, and my only business is freedom. My name is Jim Haggerty, and you are being lied to. Lucas,
way?
you've been
Yeah.
everywhere lately. Glad you're able to find the time. Now, in case anyone out there's been living under a rock lately, tell us how this all started.
So basically I went to my dad's closet, because that's where a lot of my toys are in there. And I opened a drawer. I saw his gun by accident. He showed me how to use it before, so I picked up the gun. And it felt basically the same size as my BB gun, but a little heavier. When my mom and dad walked in, I pressed down on the trigger. I didn't mean to press down that hard, and it shot them.
Unbelievable and terrifying. What kind of gun was it?
It was a black gun. It was about this big.
Ah, neat. And what happened next?
Everyone was
Him saying that he just pressed down on the trigger, so just doing that once killed both of your parents?
and yelling, and the police came over, and they took the gun. They said that they were dead forever. And now I live with my grandma, but it was just an accident.
That's right. That's right, Lucas. You didn't do anything wrong, ever. You were in your own house, on your own property, and unlike the police who stripped you of your Second Amendment rights, you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And ever since, you've been on a meteoric rise. Some people are even calling you the next J.D. Vance, the next Ben Shapiro. Heck, even some people are calling you the next Haggerty. Don't get any ideas. So, what's all this?
They have all these blocks in front of them. I think one of the things that, it's like if kids are growing up around guns, of like actually understanding what gun safety is, it's like just having the right to a gun does not mean that, like, if there are people who are around, like, there's a lot of responsibility that goes with it as well, especially when there are like kids around or they aren't stored in a way that is like keeping people safe. This is something that is consistently fought against by right-wing politicians, where like any sort of measures to implement like gun safes, that is also resisted against. So like acknowledging that it's like you can have people who are responsible gun owners where there are kids around, but like actually teaching them what all of it means, like how things function, like the gravity of the situation, to say like this is a lot of responsibility, I think is very important, and that there are very deadly consequences if things are not understood or things are not stored in a way that is keeping people safe.
Media attention been like?
I miss my mommy and dad. I want to go back home to my house.
And of course, almost immediately, the left tried to politicize the whole thing, like Mayor Petey here, who said, "This senseless tragedy could have been avoided." Another example of how we need common sense gun laws in this country. We need to seriously examine what happened here to make sure it never happens again. Never happens again? Why do you think anyone in their right mind even cares what this deranged lunatic has to say?
I don't know.
Well, the libs are coming for us both, my man. But you're not shying away from it. Your face has been everywhere. T-shirts, hats. You got a new haircut?
Yeah.
Last week you were on Rogan. You're on Theo Von. You sat ringside at a UFC fight in Vegas with Dana White?
It was loud.
And not to out you here, but I also heard a rumor that you were in a big deal closed-door fundraiser with Peter Thiel.
I didn't like Peter. So scary.
Yeah.
What are those?
Magnet tiles.
Well, it's no wonder that the big money donors are taking notice, because a lot of people are calling you the future of the Republican Party, especially after this. Can we play the clip?
I hate this. And I want to go home.
Oh.
I want it to be like how it was before.
Wow. You want it to be like how it was before. I think a lot of Americans feel the same way. We
Just taking his words and warping it. Like, the thing is like, if kids are not taught about like their responsibility involved, like what safety is, it's like, this is where that falls on parents. Like, that is their responsibility. And so, just like, I mean, it is true of like the politicizing of everything that is involved. Like in this situation, it's not like far from real life, not a whole lot of satire there, I guess. But yeah, where It's like, I was going to say something else. I don't know if that's TOS.
To be like it was before all this DIY nonsense, before Biden and Kamala Harrison and all that.
Oh, no.
Oh, was that CPAC? They asked you to speak at CPAC?
It's like, I have not liked a lot of like Kamala Harris's policies, especially in not coming out against the genocide of what is happening, like, or like all of this too little, too late shit while she was running for president. But we can also hold at the same time that like mispronouncing her name is a microaggression as well, of it being a lot of racism involved. So
That's funny, because CPAC never got back to me. Who reached out? Was it Christy? Did Christy reach out? It was Christy. I know it was Christy. Unbelievable. Fucking bullshit. Attention, patriots. If you're like me, you practically can't live without hog water. And now, for a limited time only, you can get our special edition Lucas Riley Hog Water 12-pack.
Hit it shut.
Let the liberals, demons, and freaks know that you're a hog water hero and that you support Lucas Riley, one of our last remaining good American men. And now, it's available in Lucas's favorite flavors: fruit punch, chocolate ice cream, and Sprite. Red tape regulators say it's only safe to drink if you're over 31, but I think Lucas can have a taste. Did you like that?
even how they make it look like an ad, that there's a lot of details there.
But seriously, who's more evil, Bin Laden or Zelensky?
I don't know.
I know. It's hard to choose. And frankly, there's still a whole lot we don't know about your parents, right? Were they Antifa? Were they pedophiles? Were they violent protesters? Here, you want one? That's good. These things will kill you. How many cups of coffee do you drink a day? I'm up to 11.
Coffee's gross. This is long.
All right. We're with Lucas Riley, the future face of the Republican Party. And I've got to ask you something that I ask all the guests on this show. What is a woman?
Oh, God.
It's like a lady. Like my grandma. Or my aunt. Or my mom.
See? It's not that hard, people. Oh, the more I talk to you, the more I'd vote for you. He's good looking. He's charismatic. He loves guns. He's a triple threat. I'm serious.
Say he's good
Lucas,
looking.
it's clear from your story that you're a pretty good shot, right? And if you had a gun...
I don't have a gun. The policeman took it away.
I know. But, hypothetically, if you did have a gun, could you shoot me but only hit me someplace where it's not that dangerous?
I just want to go home.
Oh, Lucas, you are home. In the conservative movement. Maybe like in the shoulder or the leg, someplace where it seems like I could die, but I survive. Maybe I'd do like a fist bump in the air, that kind of thing.
I really don't like guns. They're scary.
For our full, in-depth 6.5-hour interview with Lucas Riley, click the link now.
Patriots, if you're like me, you don't trust the stuff they're putting in the toilet water these days. That's why I only use Haggerty branded portable bathrooms. I take this portable bathroom everywhere I go so I can use the toilet safely and without fear. Would you like to use the bathroom? No thanks, I brought my own. Buy your portable American bathroom now.
He's good. He's good.
All right. A little more libbed up. Yeah, I mean, it's like there are plenty of kids as well. Of like, we have to acknowledge that there is this huge power imbalance between a parent and a child. And so, like, this is where responsibility is falling on parents to make it so that, like, if there are any sort of dangerous things around, like chemicals or whatever it may be, that things are stored properly, there's proper education involved, but also, yeah, the politicization of what this satire was showing is not really that satirical. Hello, Linton. Welcome. How are you doing? How was it picking up your friend, dropping off your friend? I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what the best sort of, like, gun laws should be. Especially when we are living in a system with law enforcement that is the way that it is, because, like, enforcing these laws seem like they will be inherently discriminatory. So, like, how do we create laws that are even around that? Good, wasn't too bad. Only the third time on the highway, though. Whoa! You did it. You survived. Congratulations. Glad it went well. All right. Shall we hear from Arundhati Roy, one of my crushes, about the cockroach movement that is happening? I mean, this is all kind of leading to the discussion of what is leftism, what is democracy, how do we have a fair and equitable society when there are many systems that are built to inherently not be fair and equitable. So even that, like, first video, or what I was saying of, like, I don't pretend to know, like, what the best way to go about laws for limiting gun violence either. Of, like, I tend to think of like the public health perspective of upstream tactics of making it so that, like, people have acceptance. I mean, maybe even just, like, having, like, gun locks, like that being something that, like, people have to have when they're buying a gun. I don't know. Or, like, some sort of education. But then also how easily that can be co-opted. Anyway. Shall we watch this?
Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We turn now to India, where massive youth-led protests are spreading across India. On Thursday, thousands...
This was from 11 days ago. So this is a while ago when we were talking about this, like, at the height of it. Or a little bit after, because more mainstream outlets were starting to cover it, like, a couple of days after we were talking about it. But I did still want to get Arundhati Roy's perspective.
Young people staged another sit-in New Delhi in defiance of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, which has violently cracked down on protesters. The protest movement is being led by the newly formed Cockroach Janata Party. The party was formed after India's Chief Justice compared India's unemployed youth to cockroaches and parasites. Protesters have been demanding the resignation of Modi's education minister. They're blaming him for the leak of national exam questions that were circulated on social media, forcing millions of students to retake the exam. Some students ended up dying by suicide after studying for the exam for years. One prominent Indian activist, Sonam Wangchuk, ended a 26-day hunger strike today that he began in solidarity with the Cockroach movement. This is Abhijit Dipka, who founded the Cockroach Janta Party, speaking earlier this week after authorities violently attacked protesters in Delhi.
Today, what the Delhi police have done, the way they beat students, the way they hit them in their heads, it was very shameful. Due to this, the country's reputation is being damaged worldwide. And we all know why Delhi police did all of this, because they received orders from Narendra Modi and Amit Shah.
We go now to New Delhi, where we're joined by the prize-winning Indian writer and activist Arundhati Roy. She has a new piece for Wire, headlined "Cockroach Democracy, Unarmed and Dangerous." Arundhati begins her piece by writing, quote, "For the first time in years, it feels wonderful to be Indian. Just when hope seemed lost, they came, young roaches riding in on the rain." Arundhati Roy, take it from there. Talk about what's happening in the streets of India and the movement adopting the name of the justice who called them cockroaches.
Well, what's happening in India, what's happening just kilometers from my home, where I will be shortly, is not thousands, Amy, but tens and tens of thousands of young people who have just flooded into the city. And now this has spread to cities all over North India, basically. And it started off as students, of course, as you said, Abhijit Dipke, just as a joke, wrote on Instagram, what if all the cockroaches came together? And they did, first online, and now in physical form. They're out everywhere in India, young people protesting.
I don't know what gun laws you could have that would circumvent the current abhorrent shit that happens while retaining arms. I guess it would just have to be accompanied by a massive increase in youth outreach, mental health services, and address the material conditions that breed violent crime. Yeah, that's kind of what I think as well, of like it's a societal thing that is systemic. I think like education being available, like to purchase firearms, like that would be helpful, but also like how, like, can we trust the government to be educating or like supporting educators in a way that is not like deeply fascist and colonizing in many ways, especially like as we are looking at all of these protests with like this cockroach movement as well, of people being just incredibly brutalized, people dying by police, and how this nonviolent resistance is expected from basically everyone who is working within a sort of so-called democratic system, of like, how is that fair and democratic to be expected to be existing in conditions that are deeply violent, and that resisting, you have to also be continuing to receive this kind of violence. And why there is so much skepticism, I think, especially for people who have more anarchist leanings, to say, like, can we truly reform a system that is always going to have hierarchies, and people are going to exploit these hierarchies, that the hierarchies themselves act as a way of violence? So, like, but then also, if, like, when there are people who are armed and there are protests, like, it can be a deterrent for police to be more brutal. Like, that's just the truth of it. But also, if someone is armed, especially as we have seen with so many people of color, particularly black men in the US, in US history, I mean, it's not exclusive to the US, but using it as a justification for cracking down in occupation of communities. So, like, what is the answer there? And it seems like there are just way more issues that are surrounding this than I think people want to unpack. I think it is much more nuanced conversation than what we want to address. And I think one of the main things especially is talking about like the NRA in the US specifically, and how they have constantly dictated who even is elected into office because of how much money they donate to campaigns, and then influence policy, where it's like there are some laws that seem like they aren't there isn't a huge overreach of government, like having safes associated with gun ownership, where those laws are really hard to pass. So it's like, but even then, like existing in the system of laws where only certain people are viewed as acceptable in owning guns, especially the people who are aligned with the system to begin with. And so it's like, even if you have like a gun safe and are like storing things safely, that if you are part of a marginalized group, especially experiencing intersections of marginalization, that even doing things quote unquote like the right way, it doesn't mean that you are not exempt from experiencing state violence or it being used against you by the state to justify oppression and killings by police, by ICE in many communities.
Officially demanding the resignation of the education minister, under whose, since 2014, the opposition says there have been 152 paper leaks, not a single conviction for anybody doing that. But more than that, the undermining of the entire system of education in India, which was and used to be a good system. But now the whole thing has, if you listen to the slogans and if you see the chanting, everything has shifted to directly attacking Modi. And this has just never happened since 2014 when he became prime minister.
Yep, when he first came into power.
2002 when he became the chief minister of Gujarat. So it's really a generation whose parents and grandparents wore those Modi masks and chanted Modi, Modi, Modi and got him into power. It is their children now who are saying the emperor has no clothes, and the mockery and the humor, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable what's going on. The dancing, the singing, that old, really boring Gandhian protest style has gone. It's just so exuberant and joyful.
The boring Gandhian protest. That's funny. It is a global thing of young people understanding what is going on. I mean, that's not to say that we don't have young people that are moving to the right or moving to be more aligned with the systems, especially as things get worse and worse for our material conditions, that there is more of this compulsion for people to feel like they must align themselves in order to be accepted and survive. And that is a very natural thing, especially if people are growing up in spaces where that is like the predominant thought that is accepted. But also, young people understand that, like when it comes to schooling and jobs and like the planet and the genocides that are happening, this extraction by capitalist colonial forces of like, we don't know if we're even going to have a world to be existing in where parents are like, oh, it's fine. But you get more conservative as you age. I know. I am a millennial, like on the like younger, like the tail end of millennials, I guess. So I feel like I like resonate, especially having older siblings, like resonate with a lot of like millennial like culture of things that we grew up with, but also like have younger friends as well. And so like being kind of in the middle at times. And it really is cool to see how like I can complain about the internet and stuff, like or just technology in general, but like millennials being the first group to not get more conservative as they age, I think goes to show some of the benefits of having access to information, and especially access to information before there were as many algorithms that were controlling what was being served. A lot of it was just like what you were searching. So that was a much more, like, if we're talking about democratic, that was a much more like democratic way of actually accessing the internet. It was kind of just like, what were you able to think up? And then you search for that, you know? But yeah, it's like, it's cool to see young people rising up, and, you know, it's sad to see at how, like, time and time again, I mean, maybe like sad isn't, well, I'm all over the place, but like the burden is constantly on young people for change. And, you know, it's like there are some older people of other generations who are leading the charge for change at various times or currently, like, not to diminish what people are doing, but often it is with the privilege of free time and stability with work, and that's not always the case, but often it is. Whereas with young people, it's out of necessity, and young people, especially marginalized young people, are uh, viewed as, or having to be on the front lines and experience more of the casualties. Because it's not an age thing, it's an asset thing. Yeah, that is true. And millennials and after were screwed on average much more than their predecessors. Yeah, that is true. That's a really great call out. Yeah, it's not just like the internet, like what I was saying, but yes, especially where like the so-called trickle-down economics of not having access to capital or assets, like what you were saying, Linton, of people just not having as many opportunities, and that the illusion of buying into the system to keep people pacified has just not been available to most. But it's not an accident as well of how, like, no matter what age you are at, the more assets you do have, the more stability you have in your life, the more likely you are to have more conservative views, because the system is not challenging your very existence. And so that's why it's like, it's great if there are people who do have this, who can be part of resistance movements, but also that's where people can be like, become the faces of movements without experiencing like the most harm. And so there's this opening for co-opting of movements as well, or it not being as radical as what is happening on the ground per se, when there are people who have more stability, have maybe more liberal views, that are able to be at the forefront of like being the face of things, of like, it's not an accident with India that like there were probably people who did not have college degrees and like access to all of the resources that the person who is being credited with spearheading this movement, of naming it. It's like, that's not to diminish his contributions, but also it means that like he had the opportunity to do that, and that there are many people like would, or maybe have been trying, and it wasn't until there was someone that had access more to large communication and like the like mass communications, the like skill set for doing that, the free time and more stability in order to go about some of these campaigns.
As I said in the piece that I wrote, there are two things. One is that this is the protesters. There are Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists. It's a sort of demonstration of what we would like India to be. But the fact is that the majority of them, the great majority of them, are the children of Modi's Hindu right-wing constituency, and therefore there is a certain protection. They are not Muslims, they're not Sikhs, they're not Christians, they're not Kashmiris. So is the police going to just shoot them down? Things are coming to a stage where you almost think that they're going to call out the army, but will the army agree to kill their own children? I don't know. So it's a very
Well,
tricky
when has that
situation
stopped
right
them
now.
before,
And Arundhati, how would you compare the cockroach uprising in India to recent other youth-led movements in nearby countries in Nepal and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka? And also, this is coming at a time when the more traditional Marxist or left-wing parties in India, in some of the states of India where they long had major power, have suffered electoral defeats. So that the left has been left sort of reeling from these defeats. I'm wondering if you could respond to that as well.
Well, how would I compare it to Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka? I don't think those comparisons would be correct, because India is too vast and diverse a country for a simple sort of student-led coup to take over. It just, like, for example, the whole of South India, although they are supporting this movement, they have largely been unaffected by Modi, and so the rage against him isn't there because he doesn't exist there. So India is too large a country for something like that. But
Modi,
we'll have
darling,
to
I hate
ask,
you.
of course, the left has been pushed back. The traditional, what we call the parliamentary left, has been pushed back. It only really exists in Kerala as a proper party. But the left is certainly inside this protest. The young left student unions are in there, and initially they were the ones who stabilized the protest because they know how to do it. A lot of young people were coming in, and there are people from everywhere, like Sonam Wangchuk, who was on hunger strike, was initially very much a supporter of the BJP. Now he's called off his fast. But the thing is that the protest is way beyond its individual components right now. But the real thing that I said is that, why is the Prime Minister refusing to make the small step of making the education minister resign? One of the reasons is that they rule like a cabal. They know too much about each other to be able to be sacked and so on. They know terrible things about each other. And the second reason is that the BJP has gamed the election system. It has reconstituted the composition of the election commission. It has reconstituted voter rolls in which millions of people are missing and millions of phantom names exist. The machines, the electoral voting machines, are tampered with. The courts look away. The police are not neutral. The bureaucracy is completely complicit. So it feels that it can do anything. It'll win an election because it's the richest political party in the world, and it is backed by the richest industrialists in the world. It can buy anything, it can break anyone, and ultimately, even these young people, they are just very young people. They don't know the forces that can come in and subvert them and beat them down and discredit them. All that is still to come. Paramilitary forces are being flown in, but the situation is very tricky, very fluid. We don't know what's going to happen.
And could you talk about the extent?
I wouldn't say that young people don't necessarily understand what can happen. I think they have been seeing it, especially with social media and sharing the footage of the violence that is happening. It's that young people are forced to not to take on that kind of risk, instead of just, it's a luxury to be like, oh no, this could like impact me potentially if like the paramilitary comes in, as opposed to people who are on the front lines and protesting. It's like, we're already experiencing a paramilitary with the police, essentially. So like, yeah, acknowledging that as well of like, it's not, it's like maybe there are people who do not or who have not personally seen in their lifetime the full force of the government to suppress and how violent it can be. But it's like, they're not like, there is a clear understanding of what people are taking on as risk, and people are forced to do this because of the circumstances.
The youth unemployment crisis in India today?
The youth unemployment crisis is beyond belief, and I don't want to quote figures to you because those figures are rubbish. For example, people who are, selling peanuts on the road or somehow trying to survive are counted as employed people. Basically, there is a crisis of unemployment from the bottom to the top because of AI now and so on. So really the future of this country is so rocky. It feels like a sort of decomposing corpse wrapped in tissue paper, and suddenly everything is beginning to leak out. And as always happens with governments like this, I mean, 10 days ago, if somebody made a mildly off-color joke about Modi, they would be in jail. Today, you have millions of people mocking him in ways which I just can't even explain. I mean, you cannot repeat those words on TV, but I don't even know how the man can come out and make a speech again, because everyone just falls about laughing. Earlier it used to be just a handful of us. Now it's this whole young generation who I just want to hug because they're so hilarious.
Arundhati.
Which that shows the power of collective action as well, of the risk is shared more. It doesn't mean that risk goes away, especially with the more intersections and marginalization that people exist in, people in lower castes that they are taking on, that they're already overly surveilled and policed and brutalized. But yeah, it just goes to show how, like, when there are large movements for things, that it makes it so that individuals are not targeted quite as much. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, because it does happen and is happening, but it really helps for sharing a lot of that risk, that burden.
If you can talk more about them reshaping the narrative of the government-controlled media, challenging Modi's carefully constructed...
You forgot about this? Oh my God, I know. Just Genocide Joe and genocide enabler Modi. Just like all not caring about, world impact here. Just, yeah, it really is insane. Yeah, Millet in the back too. Yeah, it just is a group of people that, it's like, how can the world be run by people who just don't care about human beings? But this is where we have to call into question the systems that even got them into power to begin with. Like, the fact that Modi was even able to ascend to power was largely because of Islamophobia and this fascist colonial, even though caste existed before colonization, very much leaning into caste as a way to gain power. It's like, this happens all over the world, of people wanting to have these political ambitions, and so they fuel the fires of hatred to get it so people lean into their worst inclinations.
Image to the world because they're using Instagram, they're using YouTube, as they reshape the narrative of these protests to a global audience?
So I'll start by saying that the most wicked element in India in the last, since Modi came to power, has been the corporate-owned mainstream media. It's not just that they're frightened, they are part of the project, enthusiastically a part of the project. We have this saying over here, I'll first say it in Hindi. It says, देश को चार लोग चलाते हैं, दो बेचते हैं, दो खरीदते हैं, चारों गुजराती, which means that 4 people run this country, 2 sell it, 2 buy it, and all 4 are from the state of Gujarat. And these 4 are the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, and the 2 industrialists, Ambani and Adani. Now, Ambani and Ambani's
Gujarat, that state, that's where my family is from. That's clearly that she was saying is where Modi is from, where Gujarat is one of the states that has had the most violence towards people who are Muslim. And it's not just people who are Muslim, but that was one of the ways that all of these people were able to get into power in the first place. But this intense Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, that is rampant there and needs to have it be deconstructed. Like, that is a necessity. And what is propping it up is the caste system that it has just been exacerbated through colonization, and that also needs to be deconstructed, the colonized mindsets, in order to even deconstruct these systems of caste to begin with. Because even though supposedly the caste system has been abolished, it really is not.
Own something like 27 news channels. Adani just bought one of the most neutral news channels called NDTV, and now that's fallen too. So the news media are like the captains. I call them the screaming television, live screaming TV, because they're just like the captains of lynch mobs. They get people arrested, they dehumanize people, they discredit people, they lie. And on the other hand, we have some incredibly brave YouTubers, both in English and in Hindi and in other languages. You have this young generation. I mean, Modi tried to jam the internet in Jantar Mantar, where the protest is happening. Now it's happening all over. And these kids, you can't mess around with them on the internet, So if you look at Instagram, all of us are just falling about laughing. None of us can sleep at night because it's so funny what they're doing. And in a second, this man who goes around making these ridiculous speeches abroad and hugging world leaders. Like recently he was in Indonesia and he was like, January 26th is Indian Republic Day, 2 + 6 is 8, and the Indonesian Prime Minister's birthday is 17th, so 1 + 7 is something like that.
Yeah.
Now
people make fun of Trump, especially now, with his dementia, which also has to be like, like the embedded ableism of like that can happen with that as well, of making fun of him. It's like he needs to be made fun of because he has not been competent to begin with, so like competent in the way of like actually understanding like how the government functions, and that he does not have, like, we would hope that a leader does not have deeply dehumanizing policies, even though that's just like often what gets people into office to begin with. But like world leaders have been doing this, especially when there is so much centralized power and where there is so much fear mongering, where there's this authoritarianism that people are so afraid of saying anything. It's like, this is where satire is so important, of like making fun of people but for the right reasons, of like these rambling speeches. That's like, how does that make sense? Why are you talking about that? Like, shouldn't you be like leading the country or like, I don't know, doing something that isn't evil. But again, that's also just kind of how these systems were built to begin with. Did you hear about the movie Durandar from last year in Hollywood? Yes. It's such an ethno-nationalist propaganda slot fest. Yeah, that's what I've heard about it. I have not seen it for that reason. But yeah, and that's part of it, of like the propaganda machine of like what Arundhati is talking about, of saying these media outlets have been complicit. It's like Biden, the US, like they all look at India as aspirational in the way that they look at Israel as aspirational in the way of having apartheid and caste and the complete co-opting of the minds of people, which like that doesn't mean that like everyone is buying into the system, but like co-opting of like what people believe to be reality with media outlets and entertainment, like Bollywood, of the entertainment industry being so incredibly complicit in all of this violence because of supporting Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, and making it so that people just accept this to be the norm, or at least that's what is portrayed, or some of the only entertainment that they have as available. You just saw the trailer? Yeah. It's wild. And it's something that has been happening. So again, like she's kind of framing it in a way of like one day it was happening and the other wasn't. It's like maybe at least what can happen in like older generations, if you're not like plugged into the same online spaces, that may mean that like people were saying things behind closed doors, especially young people already being upset. It's like, it's not just this one instance that young people, youth are upset. And it's not just youth, it's people who are in the working class in general, that people are very upset because it is continuing. No different from Black Hawk Down and such. Yep. I think that's a great comparison. Yeah, so like just the fact that she is noticing this now doesn't mean that there hasn't been this rising discontent and anger and frustration and acknowledgement of these conditions, these material conditions that people are experiencing. It's like people know this, but often there are just like these moments that act as a catalyst and that often get into spaces that maybe people who are part of generations that are older are not exposed to as much, where she is seeing it a bit more. But I mean, it doesn't mean that like she hasn't been aware that there has not been a whole lot of people being willing to be super public about criticizing the government, because like she has been on the receiving end of like being like banned from India many times or imprisoned, and for the things that she said against the Indian government, and how it's like that is something that she has been in the few the few and far between number in doing this for a very long time. But that doesn't mean that like young people haven't been doing it and doing it in their own ways, or people in the working class. But it's like, unfortunately, she had to be on the receiving end of this when there were not as many people who were speaking out against it. And also in these movements, when there are more people starting to do it, of like young people looking towards her and like what she has gone through, reading, being more exposed to her writing. Because like many of her books have been banned, and people actually having access to what she has been writing, of like young people being informed by her experience of like and again, not just young people, people in the working class, but especially when it comes to like the educational system, of people being inspired by what she has done, and that she may have inspired a lot more people than what she realizes, especially with how alone she has felt, I'm sure, at times with speaking out against what's going on.
There's nothing he can say and nothing he has said in the past years, which is not just being taken apart and people are just keeling over laughing. So how do you correct that image? He can't get that back. He may beat these people down, he may discredit them, some of their leaders may sell them out. You know, the kids are like, you have to see those videos. They're going to the police saying, "Sir, it's really hot, can you put those water cannons on?" And then they're dancing in the water cannons, and please give me some tear gas. And you know, it's just like, oh my God, you're
Yeah, I've seen this to cops. I love seeing that. Yeah, I've seen a lot of videos like this. It's really fierce. It's really brave to do. And especially when people are doing this in mass, it makes it so that, like, they're not targeting quite as many people individually. It's harder to do it to target everyone, even though they still are targeting some people.
is taller than me, you know, little kids, little girls are saying, and the girls are the most foul-mouthed of all. It's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just exuberance that's making up a whole heaven for someone like me.
Well, we don't want to keep you from the protests. So Arundhati Roy, thank you so much for being with us. Award-winning writer and activist. Her critically acclaimed memoir, headlined, titled "Mother Mary Comes to Me." Also, she's received numerous awards, including the Booker Prize for her first novel, The God of Small Things. We'll link to her new article, "Cockroach Democracy, Unarmed and Dangerous."
I'm like about halfway through The God of Small Things. It is very good.
At democracynow.org. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
I'm trying to find examples of people going up to cops and doing this. I'll continue looking for things, looking for examples. I should really save them as I go along on social media. All right, so as we've been talking about systems, oppressive systems, how people gain power in these systems, how they are built to be doing what they are doing. Let's watch this video from Zachap, fellow streamer. I know many people here already follow and subscribe to Zach, but if you don't, go do so. Zach does a lot of really great education, especially when it comes to theory. I'm curious to see what he says about this.
Leftists are a mixed bag. There are many, many different types. They've been infighting basically since its inception. There are old school, there are new school, there's utopian idealists, there are materialists, there are tankies, which regard the state as priority, there are syndicalists, which view the working class as the primary source of revolution instead. There's a lot of flavors of leftists. And so I would like to break down exactly what can be the main stain of how you can actually determine what is leftist cut and dry. So leftism as a term usually comes from the period of the French Revolution and such, where they try to do the liberté, égalité, fraternité thing. And this comes from pretty much liberal humanism with regards to believing that humans can all have their sovereignty. And so this is with regards to liberté, right? This would be like liberty, libertarianism. And so it's about every individual being a sovereign instead of the monarch. And
Okay. This, not like Zach needs my commentary, but off to a really great start. I did want to show this compilation that I found. Just calling out the uncles, making fun of them, being like, you're so weak.
जी आज कोई लट्ठी चार्ज मत करना, मैं चप्पल में आया हूँ क्या मुझसे भागा भी नहीं जाएगा और मैंने पजामा पहना बहुत लट लगेगा मेरे इनकी लड़ाई ऐसे लोगों से है कि जैसे ही ये पुलिस वाले मारने आते हैं वो रास पे गान गाने लगते हैं भाई इसलिए पुलिस को खड़े होना पड़ता है
पुलिस अंकल
It is empowering to be making fun of the people who think that they are so powerful because they represent the state.
then that gets into how it was a bourgeois revolution in which people could own property. Some already basically determined to have property with their relation to prior monarchs and aristocrats. And so they were kind of starting to push the needle away from monarchism and feudalism into something else. Now, obviously, this liberalism was very idealist in that it only represented the interests of the white men that wanted to reign the next sector of civilization, quote unquote, in. And so what you got was a bunch of scrappy ideas. I shouldn't really say scrappy, but ideas that have in them internal contradictions, but they sounded nice aesthetically. Now, the fact that this event and internationalization of the liberal economy has been around for so long means that it has become the conservative position. And by that I mean private property is conservatism first and foremost. When people refer to themselves as conservative, they can mean a lot of things. There's infighting in that section of the right as well. But there's never really any pushback against
Jordan
the
Peterson
sovereign
cried.
individual owning private property. Now, what is private property is different than sovereignty, though, because of that internal contradiction I was bringing up earlier. So in the same way that the feudal lords could extract rents and or landlords could extract rents from people that tended to the land, now we have another subset of the same or slash similar situation in which the people that are materially working to produce products for society somewhat, their efforts are being skimmed from. So not only with regards to profit extraction, but also the dictatorial power over how they are engaging in the world. So for a tenant, they aren't allowed to do certain things to the house because they don't own it. Someone else owns it through ideas. Or if you're working for a coal company, let's say, you aren't able to have the access to the resources to include certain levels of like PPE or certain machinery. Like you don't necessarily have a seat at the table for how to improve the work site unless you engage in labor dispute or the owner is feeling generous. And so what happens is that the worker is alienated from the production process, as well as the reaping of what they produce. And so at its core, leftists, genuine leftists that want to move to a more progressive system, wants to abolish the alienating factor in which workers aren't at the moment self-manageable.
Not sausage fingers, Charles. It's been a shit week with regard to him. His approval rating is up. Is it really? What? How?
They do not have sovereignty over their own
I
lives.
didn't know that.
Because of private property. Private property, again, being property ownership in which it is just on paper rather than genuinely whoever has a material relationship to the things that they do or the things that they use. And so whether there is a capitalist, a shareholder, a property manager, a landlord, a governmental bureaucratic body that has arbitrary say over what is to be done, disregarding the individual and their material engagement, then they can't work collectively. An example would be a hospital during a triage situation where the boots on the ground laborers, the doctors, the nurses, what have you, will self-organize to save lives in the same way that anarchists or communists would derive use value meaning automatically through their desire to improve society somewhat. Like, kind of anarchist or communism, whatever you want to call it, leftism, is triage. But on a individual / collective level. So, and the only way to do that is through the abolition of private property, because CEOs that are working for board of directors, that are working for shareholders, don't have the material interest of benefiting
bug picture.
their own, or like the workers' lived experiences and the people that they're engaging with. But
I love all the people that he is bringing up too as he's talking. I know people struggling more than ever. How about we revere the guy who believes he's preordained to receive your money to subsidize his lifestyle? Also, if you die with no will and no heirs, guess who happens to get that inheritance? Ugh. Yeah, of like how there's this socialism that exists to suppress the masses and realizing a lot of this. Which, even though like there are plenty of people who are against the monarchy, you know? Like you know that more than I do. But how it's like are there even still people that are like, "Oh, we're for the king." Like it just happens to be like tradition, but it's like, okay, tradition for whom? It's so weird, but then like that's rich coming from me as an American, where it's like, why do you have the idiots that are in power that are? And it's like, well, because of the system we're existing in. It's incredibly hard to dismantle.
have this necessary need for their class interest, which is having the line going up. And so all of society's mental labor is seemingly focused on making a line go up because it's not leftist. it's ironic that people will call making money to get material goods, quote unquote, materialist, when in fact it's the world running on a set of ideas in which we need to work for somebody else. Some vague notion of the idea that someone else has a
We keep
control
getting
over the value that we all produce.
keep
rather
getting
than
those pictures.
the individuals themselves. And so when people say that leftism is when collectivism, there is this level of irony, because no one is, first of all, independent, right? We all necessitate each other in order to have plumbing, sewers, electricity, all that, right? It is
Voter-wise, 90% of Tories support 78% of Lib Dems, 72% of Labor, and 58%. What? That's way more than I was expecting. I gotta be honest with you. That's wild. I mean, people who are even believing in the system of voting, then that makes it so there already is more like sort of quote unquote like traditional thinking of aligning with the system of like, I wonder what a more like comprehensive survey would be of people who don't vote because they already are thinking that like the system is corrupt and rigged. If that would like, or people who are unaffiliated, like what that percentage would look like. But I gotta be honest, that's much higher than I was expecting.
individuals' interest to work with other people, to do mutual aid, to do empathy, sympathy, to respect one another. The right are always asking about respect. And that is what the left should be considering to be leaning upon, is that we are desiring for no enemies. No enemies. What is the point of competition if we're on the same team, right? Thank you for listening. If you made it this far, I am a Twitch streamer. I stream every day. Education broadly, but also talking political theory, philosophy, history, and else.
Great work, Zach. Especially that chart at the end. I'm curious. I wanted to pause it. The chap, yeah, anarchist. Communist. Great work. I think he's able to explain things in a way that is very clear. Although as a whole, the number falls only to 64% who think it should remain in place when there is a wider sample. Okay, interesting. I mean, that still is quite a bit. So it could feasibly drop below a majority within a decade if the contradictions continue to heighten and if they don't get the airbag of social democracy. Yeah. I mean, like, as we've been talking about, like, propaganda of, like, entertainment and these types of media that help support the state, and how I wonder how much of that, too, of, like, just British entertainment in general is extremely royalist. Of this oversaturation, that probably having an effect too, of being like, oh look, this is culture and tradition, and it's like, well, do we want that? I always viewed that show The Crown as propaganda. And even though it has some criticism, I'm like, they spent so much money making this show. Also, I don't think they're being nearly as critical as what they should be. That's my take. All right. Shall we get into this video by Andrewism, how anarchy works? I think the descriptions that he is going over and talking about democracy in general, I think is very helpful. Good segue from what Zach was talking about, how we have been talking about today, what democracy even means. So, I'm not subscribed. Now, this is the quick description. Anarchism is the political philosophy and practice that opposes all hierarchies along with their justifying dogmas and proposes the unending pursuit of anarchy, where free association, self-determination, and mutual aid form the basis of our society. But what does that mean? Let's explore how we might organize anarchy. I think I saw something the other day. It was by like some like Trotsky accounts that there are like mutual aid should not be the end goal. And I'm like, what? Like, they have a very narrow definition of mutual aid, it seems. Where it's like, are we just talking about like having more communal ways of getting our needs met? How is that bad? Hello, Stuart Little is my son. Welcome.
Politicians, borders, landlords.
Whoops.
What if we didn't have bosses, politicians, borders, landlords, police, or prisons? There was a time when each of these things did not exist. And whatever you may believe now about their absolute necessity, have you considered that
And the two least favorable members are Pedo Andrew, obviously, and Meghan Markle. Even more? Seriously? More than Andrew? That really goes to show the misogynoir that is existing. Holy shit. Where they're like, oh yes, it makes sense why a prince would... Sorry, probably... that accent's probably offensive. Me speaking in like the upper class accent. It makes sense why a prince would be engaging in such behavior. It's like, how is that? How is that even a comparison? Oh, man. But you know, that also reveals like what many people experience in society of like, yeah, of course this is going to be viewed as more favorable, the white royal who was born into royalty man who is abusing his power, as opposed to a black woman who married into it. That it's like, that just goes to show like the larger experience of many people in society, especially black women. No, she's not more hated. I mean, obviously hated considering the love pedos get in the entrenched misogynoir. Oh, meaning Andrew is the most, and then it's Meghan. Okay. Okay, yeah, I misunderstood. That's my bad. But yeah, I mean, the fact that that's even like that they are the two really goes to show it's like, oh, so we're not gonna have like any of like Queen Elizabeth who like knew about this shit and didn't do anything like what Prince Andrew is up to. Or I guess are they talking about like people who are alive? But yeah, that there shouldn't even be like that shouldn't even be that close. Third is Harry. Yeah, it's like, I mean, Harry married Meghan. So, I mean, that's why he is, but they're like, oh, I guess he's born royalty. What? That is so weird.
Time again when we can do much better without them. Anarchists dare to desire a world without rule. Neither the rule of the minority, nor the rule of the majority. Neither the rule of the capitalists, nor the rule of the bureaucrats. Neither the rule of men, nor the rule of royalty, nor the rule of the elderly, nor the rule of warlords. Anarchy. Without rule. The world around you illustrates the consequences of a life under archy, under rule. Do the details of the crises playing out before our eyes even bear repeating? By now we should realize that there is more to
The
life
war
than
Nazi
this.
costume.
By now we should know that there is something wrong with a
What?
life of endless toil, soothed
I
by
didn't
commercial
know that.
distractions
Oh
for
my
the power
god,
and
that
profit
shouldn't
of
be
authorities,
surprising
while
though.
the earth cries out and her children weep for lack of a future. How much longer do we let these rulers run our world to ruin? These are the social, political...
Yeah, I'm guessing people are like, oh, we don't like him because he's the bad boy. He was flouting the system and like acting like with respectability, politics and stuff. Like he wasn't acting respectable. What? Oh. What? I mean, again, it's not surprising, but like it's still the fact that anyone is like, ah, look what I'm doing. It's like, this is so concerning that it just doesn't even compute. Like, what makes you even think? I mean, if you are like aligned with history and like what Nazis have done, but also to be like, this is funny. That's like trying to like parade around your allegiance, but masking it as a joke that just has been or like, oh, it's an edgy joke of like these, like par for the course for like white dude edgelords of saying like they try to mask discrimination and like horrible takes as being edgy. I think that pic was showing the Crown show versus the real pic. I think this looks like the same one. But yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah, no shame. When you haven't been like stuffed in enough lockers for shit like that. Or making so-called jokes like that, you know?
economic and environmental consequences of a life under the rule of capitalists and statists. Beyond individual rulers, these are the consequences of hierarchical systems. Those above have the power to command obedience through police, courts, prisons, schooling, taxation, property, and other systems of control, and those below can only submit. Hierarchy is among the greatest obstacles.
Hello, Duncan. Welcome back. Good to see you. How are you doing? We were talking about the Cockroach movement with Arundhati Roy, whom I have a crush on. Yep, we also watched a Zach video on leftism, and now we are watching a video by Andrewism on anarchy. Have you seen the alien invasion Andrewism vid? No, but I do have this planned, like, as an upcoming stream idea of that being on the list. I've heard it's very good. And also, like, very clever in how he is talking around things. I love that. The aliens made the pyramid or something. I know, after watching the, what is it? The Crystal Skull of, like, Indiana Jones. I made the pyramids. Okay, good to know. It took me a while to realize that that often is like an anti-Semitic trope because of Jewish people who were enslaved making the pyramids. I didn't realize that. And um I don't think I'm alone in that. I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that for a long time, I think. Where it's like, oh, this just happened, and not acknowledging the slavery that was involved. Was how to resist an alien invasion. Yep. Yep, as a way of like talking around some things that would be censored. Yeah. We'll just talk to them. I know, and I'm like, honestly, I would probably rather, like, I used to grow up having a fear of aliens, but I would probably rather talk to an alien than, like, the 1%, you know, of, like, maybe we could even, like, reason with them. Can't talk to these aliens in specific, yeah. So it's the same thing. We're talking about, in the real world sense of aliens. Convince them there's zero intelligence life here. I don't think we need to really do much convincing. I think they're like, well, this seems like it's pretty bleak. They wouldn't really have to do much.
To the full realization of a free and fulfilling social life. No one person or group sat down to design this world. It is a product of historical developments, material conditions, and social relations shaped by billions across time that have slowly, but not inevitably, entrenched specific systems of hierarchical power, patriarchy, capitalism, the state. There's no reason to believe that this is the best we can do. The assumption that what currently exists must necessarily exist is the acid that corrodes all visionary thinking. Your ability to meet your needs, your ability to find belonging in the ups and downs of a free-forming social life, your ability to create and pursue life purpose, and your ability to explore the full spectrum of your potential is constricted by a life under rule. Anarchists dare to desire a...
Keith Haring was inspired by a lot, or inspired, that being a word, like lifting a lot of things from African art, so calling that out. He probably saw the constant explosions, inequality, and climate change years ago and rid us off. That's what I think. They're like, you're already like destroying the place where you're living. We don't need anything from you. And you don't seem like you can agree on anything. You'd be like willing to be under our rule. I'm going to take politics and philosophy as my undergrad. Ooh, I love that. That's great. What made you decide that?
Without rule. And for that, across the spectrum of politics, we are mocked, ridiculed, and defamed. But this message is for those who see what I see, who want to seek out new horizons for the future of humanity and a better way of life for oneself.
We need to
for
colonize
those like
Mars.
me, who are ever seeking to learn and explore as much as possible.
Like, what is this song? I know this song.
This message is for those curious about how we might organize anarchy.
Want to understand how governments work and why they are the way they are. I think that's a great reason. I love that. Yeah, and also understanding as well of like higher education, these institutions also have their own like vested interests in what we learn. That's not to say that like the pursuit of education is not like cannot be very enlightening and helpful. Do you work in academia perchance? No, I don't. I did get a bachelor's degree in English. My minor was in music, classical, like vocal performance. But I am a prime example of like questioning a lot of these institutions, which, you know, probably has helped lead me onto this path of having more like anarchist leanings in thought and understanding that there needs to be information widely available that isn't just held within these institutions of learning. But yeah, my emphasis was in critical literary theory. I was at BYU, which is a Mormon college, and we read the Communist Manifesto, surprisingly, but we got a very specific reading for it, and I would write papers on it, but it was within that framework. So I like, one of my professors like, this is our local Marxist, and I was like, don't tell my dad that. I think I like have a paper online where I was writing about Marxism in a very overly simplistic way that is like, he's like, he didn't like religion, and I was at like a religious school. But so I got that particular training. We didn't read like hardly anything about like feminist theory. We didn't read any queer theory. And we certainly did not read any sort of like intersections of these things. Anything that was like pretty leftist or decolonizing. And so like there was clearly an agenda for us to graduate with a specific worldview. But little did they know that like being exposed to Marx helped me to realize, I'm like, oh, this reading of like taking a framework, a lens of looking at art, that you can do this with life, that like the commodification of really everything that exists within capitalism made it so it was a deconstructing process. Be critically aware of the curriculum, though. They will not be teaching you a balanced view. You will have to do a lot of that work yourself. It'll be centrist, depends on the faculty, I guess. Yeah, and that's true of like acknowledging all of those things. Like part of what I like to do with streaming here is learn more about things that I wish that I had learned, and to destigmatize the process of learning, of like we're ignorant about so many things, and there are many forces that are working to ensure our ignorance, and that there shouldn't be shame in wanting to learn more. I think that is like a very great pursuit, the pursuit of knowledge, but in a way that is available widely to people. So yeah, I think that's great. You're wanting to study that, but also like if you have like some faculty that they're more willing to talk about certain things, like being a nerd and like asking questions, even like pushing back on professors, you know, or like going into like office hours of like if they aren't allowed to talk about certain things. This is what I would do with like some of my professors, is like a gateway into like deprogramming my mind from like Mormonism and being able to have a space to ask questions. And yeah, just like making sure you're aware that there are agendas wherever you will go. I wonder whether universities evolved with time. I know, and like ultimately, if we were working towards having like learning be free and widely available, there wouldn't be quite as many agendas. That doesn't mean to say that there wouldn't be any, but it would be much harder when we have like so much money that goes into these systems that it's very classist on its face. And so you will be learning a lot about what is upholding the system to begin with. Don't know when you went, but I've heard that a lot of stuff has changed in the last 6 years due to COVID, apparently. No, it is true. Yeah, now people have like garments, the like secret underwear that has changed, so people can like wear like tank tops. Like it was basically like after we left, like me and my partner, that things started to get much better for people, and it's because of COVID. Like what you were saying, they were hemorrhaging membership because like people don't want to go back to church. You don't want to go to church for 3 hours, and then you also don't want to go for like 2 hours during the week for activities, and then also volunteer for all these things because no one gets paid. It's all volunteer based. What year did you leave? I think it was like right before COVID. So like maybe even in the year of 2020, 2019, of like taking my records officially off the church, because then what they do if you don't do that is that like your name counts towards membership. And so there are a lot of people that don't go to church, or they don't believe in it anymore, but they try to inflate their numbers artificially by being like, look at all the people that we have. And like, it's people who just don't care anymore. And also, if you are still on the records of the church, they will send missionaries to you to get you to go back to church. Sounds so cultish. It is. This is just the tip of the iceberg. It's very, very much so. I will be the first to say that. And I think anyone who tries to say otherwise is not really exposed to as much of what goes on, and also is maybe in it. Yep, I was in it for my whole life. I grew up in it. So that is also like anyone who grows up in a religion, that's something that, you know, we all can experience of like, here is this particular worldview or ideology that was imposed, that you can't possibly consent to that. And like religion isn't just that type of system that is imposed on all of us, but there is essentially no separation of church and state when it comes to living in Utah. Most recently, and you brought this up, Linton, as well, of like learning about the like minifigs, bricks and minifigs situation of people being like, whoa, the police, they're corrupt and they're all Mormon. And it's like, yeah, I mean, this is just how it is. It is that like if you are drawn to working for the state, like the state was even like gaining statehood to begin with, of like the so-called founding was because of Zionist colonizers who committed ethnic cleansing and genocide of indigenous tribes, that it's like it's based off of religious fundamentalism. So why you will see like Governor Cox, the governor of Utah, he is like tries to come across as like a Boy Scout, where he's like, oh, I can't do anything bad, like I'll listen, like we just need to disagree better and then we'll get along. Meanwhile, he's doing like incredibly corrupt things and bending to corporate interests. It's like a pattern of behavior, because like the church takes so much money from people and then invests it in the stock market. Is there a way to dispute the weird-ass posthumous inductions within the church? They're so insane. Yeah, they are. And I don't... It's such a, like, a slippery thing where it's like people... It tries to go, like, unnoticed, because it's like, oh, you can't talk about this because we can't talk about what happens in the temple because it's sacred, as opposed to being extremely problematic and non-consensual, of doing work for the dead, of like that's what you do in the temple, you like go through for yourself, but then you go through and do like ancestors' names, and you have, and not even just ancestors, just like anyone who is dead, and you convert them to Mormonism. It is incredibly nefarious. It finally got noticed more globally after there were some people doing these rituals and ceremonies for people who died in the Holocaust, because like, oh, we want people to be saved. And it's like, you do realize that people even died to begin with, like, especially when it came to Jewish people, because like not just Jewish people died in the Holocaust, but Jewish people specifically died because of Jewish identity. imagine that. And now you're forcing them to be Mormon without consent. It's like, that's white supremacy. It just is a continuation of what people experienced in their life of being targeted. After how much time did you leave it? I'm like math. I was about, how old am I now? So it was like 2019. So it was like 7 years ago. I'm 31 minus 7, 24. That's embarrassing going that slow through math. Geo Cockroach Movement. Hello, Dina. Welcome. Good to see you. Yep, I was in it for most of my life. In Mormonism, that is. It's a weird place. Yeah, we were talking about the cockroach movement. But to like blend these things that we are discussing, my grandpa came from India, and we think that their family chose, like our family chose BYU specifically, the cockroach movement. Yes, I'm gonna relate this to India and Indian identity as well. So like the reason I even grew up in Mormonism, because my grandpa is Indian, and that's my last name is Sanskrit. And he came to Utah, and it's a weird place, like to be at BYU, this random Mormon school. And we think it's because there was a program that was for Indian people. I don't know the name of the program, but it was marketed with the term Indian. And that upon getting to BYU, he realized that it was Native people who are indigenous to the Americas. And so, like, when we're using the language of colonizers, we're still dealing with that bullshit that Christopher Columbus did back in the day of, like, these misnomers and exonyms. And so he was like, oh, I'm not Native, but he was one of the few people who was actually from India at BYU. He, like, asked for tea in, like, the lunch room that they have, and tea is not allowed in Mormonism. I'm sure there are more people drinking it now as, like, rules have relaxed more, but, like, people, like, laughed at him and, like, made fun of him and stuff. And, like, of course, like, being a brown man in a predominantly white space, having an accent, he converted to Mormonism and then didn't go back to India. And he was also the eldest son of a Brahmin family. So this was created very turbulent relationships where he was disowned, but then he cut off all contact with them, with family, and didn't want to talk to people even after family reached out after years of not having contact. And so, like, he still has not gone back to India, and both of his parents died without him talking to them again, which is incredibly sad. But it was around the time of, like, when I was, like, 21, 20, where we were reunited with Indian family, where we actually went to India to visit, and, like, some Indian family came out to visit as well. So, like, that was cool, but also, like, just to be, like, reunited is, like, when I'm, like, deconstructing all of these things in Mormonism, as well as, like, colonization, as well as, like, structures of hierarchies within society. And so I'm, like, offending most family members by talking about the ills of Mormonism, Brahmanism, caste. So there you go. India is very orthodox sometimes. Yep, exactly. How we have Hindu nationalism. We were talking about Modi. We were talking about Arundhati Roy, whom I have a crush on. She was talking about the cockroach movement. So this is how all of this is connected. Unlikely, but this is also my life, I guess. And this has led me to deconstructing all of these systems and being like, going from very conservative, white supremacist religion and deconstructing all of that bullshit to be like, oh, I'm queer and non-binary, and also embracing Desi culture and identity, and then being like more liberal with politics, and then breaking down some of that and being like, oh, a lot of these systems are incredibly harmful and like being at the receiving end of a lot of this harm. And like, so like, can these systems to be trusted when they are built off of genocide and stolen land and colonization, when they are functioning as they were built to function? So this is where we are at now in talking about anarchism. Something that I wish I would have been exposed to for my critical literary emphasis and classes for my degree. Funniest thing is that the first nationalist movement was against religious involvement in the state. Yep. So that the entire thing is a contradiction. Yeah, and that's also why, like, something we talk about here and like something that many people talk about is like, there's no movement that can't be co-opted, and how there are many actors that can move in and want to, especially when it is state sanctioned or this infiltration happening, where there are many movements that there is a falling system that is being overtaken or like revamped, reformed in some way, or like kicking colonizers out like the British, but that they have little pawns that they put in movements to be like, okay, we're going to take this nationalist sentiment so that you are then favorable to the colonizer, but we won't tell anyone. You will be the face of this movement, but we still want to maintain a foothold here, which is what, you know, many colonizers have done with all of these revolutions and gaining independence. Why there is instability in countries, it's because of it being fomented and there being instability to begin with because of colonization. Just had an argument with my big sister over politics. She gets mad about I'm an anarchist and what that entails. Well, she's a liberal or some shit who loves borders. I know, it can be... I think anarchism is really misunderstood. It's like you can have some people who have anarchist inclinations who are right-wing, who are like, we shouldn't have any government, and they think it is like there isn't any sort of theory behind it. A lot of the time it's just about like not liking any sort of like systems, or where it is wanting chaos, as opposed to coming from a more principled standpoint of saying that like these systems were built off of hierarchies, that hierarchies mean that there are some people who are viewed as worth more and often are within these systems so that they have more access to resources and human dignity. Even in something like a so-called democracy where there is representative politics, where we dilute our personal consent by vesting it into a representative who may or may not act in our interest, that we don't have that kind of autonomy over what happens to us, and how the whole like electoral system can be incredibly corrupted. Tamil Nadu's opposition leader got arrested by the cops because he said some inappropriate innuendo about the partner of the CM. Free speech laws here are non-existent. Yeah, and I mean, especially like depending on like what caste people are coming from too. Like that really makes a difference. Like what people's political leanings are, people who are surveilled more than others. But it seems like, yeah, there have been many aspects of Indian society that are just co-opted, like with the media and entertainment. Is something we were talking about earlier, of all of these media outlets, so-called news outlets, Bollywood being a creator of this narrative, what it means to have romance or action, and entertainment being overt Hindutva propaganda, and how like any sort of dissent against the state is incredibly squashed down. So that's something that like Arundhati Roy has talked about for a long time and been experiencing for a long time and speaking out against the government. And how with this most recent cockroach movement, that there are more young people speaking out, more working class people speaking out against the government, and that it's much harder to target people individually when it's happening in mass. Hello, Bouncy. Arundhati Roy mention. I know, I keep saying this, but I have a crush on her. Insulting modesty and dignity under Section 79 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, formerly Section 509 IPC, using words, sounds, gestures, or slurs intended to assault a woman's modesty or intrude upon her privacy is a criminal offense punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Yeah, it is incredibly vague. And especially when it comes to modesty, it sounds like all of these laws that exist across the globe that's supposedly to protect women, when in actuality it's used as a way to oppress women, because there are very specific ideas of what modesty means when there are these like to the ruling class, when they are the ones defining it. And a lot of the time what is considered modest still comes from these Victorian colonizing so-called values. The First Amendment's a great thing. Yeah, I mean, it also is, I think there's much more of a crackdown on people speaking freely in India than there is in the US, but that doesn't mean that like everyone is even afforded the right of the First Amendment too. Of like, there has always been an attack on people being able to speak freely, of like why the political prisoner Mumia, who's part of the Black Liberation Movement in the 80s, because he was a leader, still is a leader, was imprisoned with all of these trumped up charges, accused of murder, where he was on death row, even though no such thing happened. And how there are people, especially when they are part of insurgent movements. Mumia Abu Jamal. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Where he's still in prison. He's had his death sentence commuted, but he is still there since the 80s. And it was just because he was speaking truth to power. So it's like, that's an example of like, there are certain populations, especially in the more marginalization people experience, the more likely you are to not be able to speak freely. Or even how we have seen globally, anyone speaking out against genocide, of like people losing jobs, of people being surveilled and kidnapped, trafficked, imprisoned by ICE, and not just ICE, but like what's happening with Palestine Action and all over the world, of people speaking out against genocides happening in Palestine, in Sudan, in the Congo, that there is really like how we are seeing in the algorithm, like even on YouTube, of getting information on Sudan and the Congo is really difficult because of this suppression of free speech. It doesn't mean that there aren't people talking about it. It just means it's being suppressed. So like, who is allowed to speak and why? Speech is not always free. And when you are speaking freely in a way that is establishing your own opinions, that isn't just regurgitating what you're being told, if you're like critically thinking about things, hopefully, that often is viewed as very threatening to the state, because us being decolonized beings that have control over our own minds is incredibly threatening. Yep. I was gonna say something else as a segue, but I lost my train of thought. This is why it's important to be talking about not multiple, but so many different kinds of thought and frameworks of like where this video is How Anarchy Works by Andrewism, where I wish I had learned more about leftist thought in my schooling. I did not learn about this in my Mormon college, surprise, surprise. And how like we must question all of these institutions to be thinking about what their interests are. Are they upholding these structures of class and capitalism and these hierarchies of human dignity? And one thing that anarchy acknowledges is that there even are hierarchies, and that there are times where people who are like overly invested in democracy and saying like, this is our way for having control over what is going on, and it's like, or do you just have the illusion of control? It's like that's the reason Socrates was sentenced to death, is because he was going around telling people that that democracy is an illusion. And so they're like, you need to drink hemlock. Don't tell people that. We want people to forget that that there are slaves in society, and that there are servants, and that we are the inventors of democracy here. So we see what happens to people when they are speaking truth to power, but why, as we have been seeing with the Cockroach movement, or just in general across the world in solidarity with Palestine, that like when we are speaking as a collective, that like our numbers really do matter. And this is where there is a lot of power in actually standing up for our humanity, that it is much harder to take us down when there are a lot of us. And there are a lot of us, and they want us to forget that. All right. I'm thinking about what I want to finish covering. So we just started this video. Maybe I'll reserve it for tomorrow, because I did want to finish this video on Hecate, since we're reading Macbeth. And I think we have like just enough time to finish the Hecate one. Okay, since we just got started on the Andrewism one on anarchy, we'll watch it tomorrow. But that's a little sneak peek, a little preface for tomorrow. Let's switch gears. I mean, as we are talking about resisting oppressive systems, something that is important to acknowledge within Macbeth, the history of Hecate, this Greek goddess of witchcraft, that there are many forms of witchcraft which often come from indigenous traditions, that witchcraft has been a way for people to resist oppressive systems, especially in acknowledging where people believe power lies, and how there can't be a separation between colonizers quite literally demonizing indigenous people and cultures and traditions, and using that as a justification to colonize, extract resources, steal land, dehumanize people, ethnically cleanse, genocide people, especially when it comes to people experiencing multiple intersections of marginalization, when it comes to women and queer people, people of color, people with disabilities, that like this all is interconnected. We have current witch hunts happening with all of these powers that exist, especially like in the US, where they're like talking about like, oh, it's a modern McCarthyism. India has a law against black magic. Yeah, that is true. And also that probably just is a way to target indigenous tribes, you know? Of they're like, oh, this is black magic, and it's like, oh, we're practicing medicine, or like anything that is metaphysical, because if people then start to engage in traditions and this type of decolonization, or viewing these other forms of like power existing that the state can't control, then they start losing their power. Like, as an example, there are many examples, but there are many people who practice witchcraft as a way to decolonize. Like, there are many people who practice witchcraft for a number of reasons, and like it's an incredibly diverse thing to even be acknowledging, like, what does witchcraft even mean? But after the election of Trump, one of the first like forms of protest I ever saw was at the Capitol. At least in Utah, there was a protest by a coven of witches putting a hex on this administration. And I'm like, that's really fierce. I fucking love that. Where it like goes to show of like people who not only are involved in witchcraft, but they're involved in mutual aid efforts of like, we're creating a matriarchal system. And it's not even just matriarchal, it's decentering patriarchy. So like that is a threat towards this patriarchal system where people are actually gathering and talking, embracing other ways of existing outside of this white Christian nationalist one, especially, that I was like, that's pretty fucking cool. I love that. Okay, this is me connecting all the dots. This is like one of my favorite pastimes. I'm like, how is this connected? And how is this? At the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but like, who is calling us conspiracy theorists if it's not based in like dehumanizing rhetoric where it's like state funded to be like, look over there. Like, what is conspiracy, you know? All right. So we are reading Macbeth because I like it. But we also are coming from a decolonizing lens. I think it's good to be talking about the historicity of things so that we get context of even acknowledging who Hecate is. Dialectical materialism on my screen? Gasp! Such things exist? Oh no! Yep. It's what we're doing. But it's also Hecate is a character in Macbeth. And also, I think it fits in very well with talking about decolonization, especially as like we have people who claim, like with all of the Epstein stuff, all of these pedophilic 1% capitalist colonizing shitheads that they're like, this is a witch hunt. That's like, do you know what a witch hunt is? Because I don't think that's what this is. You don't understand history, but we can't claim like the 1% to have like a good grasp on anything really besides their money and power. They don't care about critical thinking, clearly. So where was I going with this? Oh, the like modern day witch hunts that we are having with leftist thought, communists, anarchists, that it's not an accident that Antifa, when it's a sentiment, it's not like this centralized organization is being targeted or is classified as a terrorist organization, and the KKK still hasn't. Maybe that's because we have an overrepresentation of Klansmen in the police force and ICE and in the halls of power. It's not an accident that the Southern Poverty Law Center was defunded by the government, and They're getting all of like their research grants removed because they actually research white supremacist movements and are able to infiltrate a lot of these groups so that they can track their violence. It's also not an accident that this fascist regime, not that we haven't had fascist regimes before, is deleting all of these reports on political violence and the groups of people who are committing the most kinds of violence. Let's just say that if we deported all white Christian nationalists, but especially the men, we would have virtually no political violence and hardly any sort of violent crime. Because what are we even considering to be crime and violent in a system that is inherently violent and criminal? Anyway, that was a long setup for this video, but this video is the ancient origins of the goddess of witchcraft. There are a lot of symbolisms that are pulled from this by Shakespeare, not from this video specifically, but from the mythology of Hecate by Shakespeare, and also King James, who Shakespeare was appealing to, the ruler at the time who was colonizing Scotland and Ireland with his imperialist ambitions by he quite literally demonizing people by saying that they're witches, by starting all of these witch hunts, writing a book on demonology, having a version of the Bible that he controlled, the King James Bible. Like, that's all not an accident. It is to justify political supremacy and the consolidation of his power. So this is all to say, this is what we're learning about. And state oppression. Anyways, here's the second thing. Exactly. If you want to learn more about witchcraft, the goddess of witchcraft, patroness, here we go. It's all related.
Over time, Hecate's...
Wait, I should probably... No!
Was an
state.
epithet.
No, I'm kidding. If I leave videos up for too long, like more than a day, then it's like, content not found. I'm like, okay, that's rude.
Diana and Hecate, which conflated the two figures even more to the point where the Romans celebrated the multiple identities of Diana as Hecate, Luna, and Trivia. So all that is to say is basically I'm Hecate. Anyway, over time,
that was
Hecate's
me just
original pre-Hellenistic form
all that to
became
say
largely lost
this.
to history, and Hesiod's treatment of the day.
I love her joking like this because she's so serious most of the time.
Folded her into the Greek pantheon. Hecate's role as a deity of the underworld did not become a huge feature until the time of the Greek tragedians, who connected Hecate to witchcraft and death. And from there, her heavy association with evil and witchcraft only grew in prominence until, by medieval period, European traditions almost exclusively depicted Hecate as the goddess of witchcraft and the moon. So let's talk about her name for a second, because again, this adds to the complexity of Hecate's origin story. The origins of Hecate's name, conceptualization, and character are still up for debate amongst scholars today, with some believing that she is Anatolian in origin rather than Greek, even though she is associated largely as a Greek goddess by the Greeks. Now, I hope many of you humour me here, because I like to make all my videos as accessible as possible to everyone in regards of your understanding of ancient history, so let me just take this opportunity to clarify the distinction between the Greeks and the Anatolians to those unfamiliar, as it can be confusing, especially considering the Anatolians are also known as the Anatolian Greeks, the Asiatic Greeks, and even the Asian Minor Greeks. The Anatolians were Indo-European speaking peoples of the Anatolian Peninsula in present-day Turkey, identified by the use of now extinct Anatolian languages, and the most well-known of these being the Hittite. So these languages were gradually supplanted by the Greek at the beginning of the Mycenaean times, once the western coast attracted settlers from mainland Greece. So from around 2000...
Something that she is addressing throughout this whole video, just to catch some people up if you weren't here for the previous half, It's great because I'm saying nice and no ice all at the same time. I love that. Yes, abolish ice. Fuck ice. Fuck their colonizing, ethnic cleansing tactics. Something that she is talking about throughout the video is how there are these reinterpretations of mythology and tradition, whether you're going from Greek to Roman, but then also Roman to like other empires, and how there is a constant retelling of previous cultures, whether it is like a subsuming of it and co-opting, or whether it is a way to justify another empire coming into power. So there are these reinterpretations that either justify the imperialist alignment with previous empires, or it is a way, another interpretation added to then demonize these other empires and to justify the existing empire.
Until 1000 BCE, 3 tribes of people moved from northern European to the mainland of Greece. So first we had the Ionians, then the Achaeans, and then last the Dorians. And then around 1050 BCE, when the Dorian tribes invaded mainland Greece, the Ionians, who lived near the city of Attica, left, crossed the Aegean Sea, and colonised the west coast of Asia Minor, i.e. Anatolia, and with this colonisation saw the domination of the Greek language. So what has anything of this got to do with Hecate? Well, her name seems to be Greek, and she has been largely accepted by as a Hellenic deity, even by the Greeks. However, some scholars have pointed out that despite this, she's been pretty left out by Greek tribes in early worship and literature. As I already mentioned, there's no mention of her in the Homeric epics, or the Iliad, the Odyssey, and not even the fragments of the Homeric epics, which is of note, especially considering the catabasis, the journey to the underworld in the Odyssey. She's never mentioned, despite having heavy importance in the Greek religion. And it only comes much later, though, and through her association with Demeter and Artemis, and the later Greek writers give her inconsistent origin stories, which probably is due to her lack of presence in early Greek tribal worship and literature.
I think the key word here, tribal, of like perhaps people were worshipping Hecate too much, in that it was threatening to the existing systems, and that she was intentionally left out of these major works. It can't be separated, the artist's dependence on the rich and wealthy in order to write art or create art. It's not just writers, but like Homer, Shakespeare, we're talking about both of these people. How they often would align themselves with these empires, with these oppressive systems in order to have their art made. And sometimes there would be like some sneaky writing in there where they would, on its face, be appealing to the ruling class, but they would have some kind of subversive imagery or characters speaking out of turn, or like Shakespeare having people from the working class, like characters actually, and like clown type characters, like jesters, be making jokes about the ruling class in slang. So like just what common people were speaking, so that the ruling class wouldn't understand that they were being made fun of. But like, it doesn't go far enough in my mind. And there is this complicity with these systems. And like even the most recent example of Boots Riley making I Love Boosters. I mean, the film is great, and how it created this conversation about accepting money from the Ellisons in order to have it created, and how we are all making compromises within this capitalist system, but why it is necessary to have the imagination to be creating art outside of these systems, and why anything that is like employee owned, anything that is crowdsourced, that is for the working class, from the working class, will always create better art because it's not making compromises in this way.
Additionally, There aren't many temples or images of her associated with prehistoric period or legend, and the magic practices performed in her name of Hecate and the sorcery that made her a form of terror are not
Most
Hellenic
anarchists
in
would
nature.
mob congressional Republicans
So scholars
so
who
hard
argue that
they
she
get
is not of Greek
to
origin, but of
Ohio.
Anatolian, specifically
Yeah,
Carian or
exactly.
Carian origin, also argue that her personal
Ohio,
names
especially like
are
JD
formed
Vance
from
too.
Hecate, like that of
He's like, I'm from Ohio, and it's like, are you? Because you don't. It doesn't seem like it. Also, why are you writing a book like as we're talking about appealing to the ruling class, like his like Yale friends, where he wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy? I'm like, I don't think the community where he was from would appreciate that type of depiction. So like, who was his audience, you know, and like, why was he wanting to appeal to them?
Hecataeus, the geographer, or Hecatomus, that's such a mouthful, who gave his name to the dynasty of Masolos, occur primarily in Caria or Caria during the 5th and the 4th centuries BCE. So these scholars argue that her Carian or Carian cult was introduced to the Greek mainland from Asia Minor in the Archaic period, and that contamination with witches and demons, e.g., happened in Thessaly, and that eroded and infernalized her Olympian stature, transforming her into the Hecate that we know in later traditions, the recipient of table scraps and canine blood. These scholars also argue that she appears in her original Carian or Carian form in the earliest literary monument to her cult. That being the...
Okay, just to be clear, the captions are pretty bleak here. She didn't say Korean, but that's how it was interpreted.
passage of her in Hesiod's Theogony, lines 411 to 52.
Korean. Writing
Now,
this
Hesiod
down.
comes across as pretty big fanboy
for the
of
upcoming
Hecate in this
test.
section. He praises
did not
her
say
for
Korean.
more than any of the titans whom Zeus favoured, and she's said to have her portion of land, sea and sky, and mediates appropriation of gods and blessings conferred upon men, which is a pretty big deal. Now, this is important because Hesiod's origins come from Asia Minor, because although he was born in mainland Greece, his family were from Asia Minor. And additionally, this is important because we have what archaeologists now call today the sanctuary or temple of Hecate at Legina, which is located in the southwestern modern-day Turkey, which was once called Caria or Caria. Caria or Caria, I've had it both ways, resisted Greek influence until the Hellenistic period, between 323 to 31 BCE. And this temple of Hecate is said to have been built around 125 BCE, and it eventually fused Hellenistic and Carian
The name
and
Asia
Carian
Minor
cultures.
doesn't make
Excavations have
any
found
sense.
evidence.
No, I agree. I'm glad you called that out. Just call it Anatolia. Yep. It also is like, it goes to show like this is a more like Western, as like we have so-called like Western civilization, these terms that are used to other
Of ritual activity earlier than 125 BCE at the site, with the temple having been built on top of buried religious offerings from the 4th to 2nd centuries. The most notable find on the site was on the west frieze of her temple, which depicts Hecate standing in a prominent position in the midst of the Titanomachy.
big
The
big
friezes
big time
around the
even.
temple,
I know.
she's identified in them by the iconographical torches, and most notably in one frieze, Hecate is depicted in the centre, her cloak billowing as she runs towards Kronos with a bundled object, which is the rock that was passed off as baby Zeus in her arms. In the frieze, Hecate, serving as a midwife or nurse, looks anxiously back towards Rhea as she plays this critical role in what brings about the
I know. They're all just frozen as opposed to like the piece, the art form serving. Exactly. What was I going to say? It probably wasn't important.
fall of the Titans once and for all. Now, interesting, in the Theogony,
Those frieze.
Hecate doesn't play this role, But the connection with her importance
Exactly.
in this frieze to Hesiod's passage of her demonstrates that the builders at Legina
This is why, you know, ideally we have captions that are not auto-generated. If I am able to get to a point of having enough money to do so, I think the most responsible thing so that it is accessible is making it so that you have human beings looking over captions. How do you spell the art form? Oh, that's a good question. I think it's this. Freeze? Uh-oh. Am I doing the I before E thing? Freeze. Okay. I spelled it correctly. Yeah, no problem. It's not a common word. So, like, it can make sense why, like, the captions are like, if someone's saying freeze, it's probably the one that's used most often, but, like, we need human oversight. We don't need robots. Like, I upload some clips and, like, VODs to YouTube, and especially with, like, so much of my, like, work and jobs before this being to, like, make things more accessible, I'm like, ugh, this is not responsible to do, but it takes a lot of time. So, like, I would like to get to a point where I can do that, where there are services and, like, having people look things over, human beings, for captions. I was just in a museum. No, you're good. Also, it's not like that, like, word is written everywhere, you know? Wish I learned stenography so I could type faster just to help do things like dictation and shit. I do not read fast enough, though. I mean, it's hard. It is really hard to do. Yeah, of, like, doing things in real time where it's like you have to be, like, thinking ahead, and, like, yeah, it's a very, it's not only like a mental, like an arduous mental exercise, but also with, like, typing, like, the way that you're getting the words out, you have to be doing that quickly enough.
were intentional in creating a profile of their goddess as a powerful figure whose purview over the affairs of humans and the role as an intermediary between the divine and the mortal made her an ideal civic patron. But then there are other scholars who completely refute all the Carian evidence of Hecate's origins, arguing that she did exist in cults within the Mycenaean Greece. And they start first by dissecting the etymology of her name in terms of the Greek language, arguing that her name may derive from the name Hekatos, an obscure epithet of Apollo, and interpreted as the far-reaching one or the far darter. Now, this epithet, they argue, brings her into the identifying realms of Artemis, who's strongly associated with Apollo and, as we've already discussed, frequently equated with Hecate. Supporters of this etymology suggest that Hecate was originally considered an aspect of Artemis prior to the latter's adoption into the Olympian pantheon, when Artemis was more strongly associated with purity and maidenhood, meaning her origin.
That's cool. You went to a museum recently. I love that. Which one did you go to? If you don't mind sharing. You also don't have to if you're not comfortable. So the way that she is using epithet, it is the definition of an adjective that is describing a particular quality or characteristic of a person or thing, but how it is used in more like of a modern sense, not within this more like what is considered like classical tradition of like an alias of sorts. I guess it's not really an alias, but like just another name, like a nickname. That's a better word. But how now it often can mean something that is abusive or dehumanizing as a description of describing people based on attributes or characteristics, but them being minimized to those attributes and characteristics that often are used by these systems to justify their political hegemony. I can DM you with the deet if you want to know. Yeah, of course. And I'm glad you're doing what you feel comfortable with too. Yeah, because I think you are part of the Discord if you want to do that there. But also, no pressure if you change your mind.
Darker attributes like her association with magic and the souls of the dead and the night would have been continued to be worshipped separately under the title of Hecate. Fascinating, isn't it?
Thank you.
But according to Pausanias,
see.
the 2nd century CE Greek traveller, the island of Aegina had a mystery cult dedicated to the goddess, where it is believed that those suffering from mental illnesses could be cured. Kos, Erythrae, and Samothrace, Thessaly, and Meletos also worshipped the goddess, with the later having a 6th century BCE circular altar at the Delphinion, a temple dedicated to Apollo, for sacrifices to be made in her honor.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, whatever you're comfortable with.
Evidence of her worship. There was also an area sacred to Hecate in the precincts of the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, where the priests, which it's Megabizi or Megabizi, but to me, when I see it written, I just want to say Mega Boys, which is why I laughed. Basically, what they officiated, the Mega Boys. So this sanctuary was called the
Mega Boys,
the Shrine of Hecate. Additionally, according to Pausanias, Hecate was worshipped in the temple of Athena in Titan. Quote, in Titan, there is also a sanctuary of Athena, into which they bring up the image of Coronis, which is the mother of Asclepius. The sanctuary is built upon a hill, at the bottom of which is an altar of the winds, and on it the priest sacrifices to the winds one night in every year. He also performs other secret rites of Hecate at 4 pits, taming the fierceness of the blasts of the winds, and he is said to chant, as well as the charms of Medea. Additionally, there is a holy cave on the island of Samothrace, known as Zerinthos, which is considered an important sanctuary to Hecate. Now, to add to her obscurity, Hecate had unusual rituals performed in her honour. So, Hecate's Deipnon, also known as Hecate Supper, was a religious offering meal given to Hecate and the restless dead once a lunar month. The meal included small cakes of eggs, cheese bread, and dog meat, which were lit with miniature torches, or alternatively a dish of red mullet, which was usually prohibited from offerings to
in such a deadpan way.
Most families placed the meal on top of or inside the small shrine to Hecate that they had outside of their door after sunset. And this was because the street in front of their house and the doorway into the home created a 3-way crossroads, which was obviously sacred to Hecate. Of course, this meant that the meals were often eaten by those in extreme poverty who happened to be passing those houses at that night. And as Aristophanes wrote, quote, ask Hecate whether it is better to be rich or starving. She will tell you that the rich send her a meal every month and that the poor make it disappear before it is even served. The ancient Athenians performed this ritual because they believed, once a month, that Hecate led the spirits of the unavenged or wrongfully killed, accompanied by hounds from the underworld up to Hades.
Maybe if the poor actually had more access to resources, the labor that they are generating, that there wouldn't be this need for actually finding food, when like that should just be a human right. Maybe the poor share the meal with you or something. Yeah, exactly. Again, this is the time of where people like to say, especially white conservative people, but not just conservative people, where they're like, this is the time of like the bastion of democracy, the birthplace of democracy. That's like, oh, is it? So this is what democracy is? Interesting. Seems like there are some people who just don't have enough to eat, that there are slaves in this society.
And the meal was to placate the soul's longing
Your Eminence, you're not touching your meal, so these folks will have at it. Yeah. You're just leaving this food here? Well, there are people who need food. What about that?
was done to purify the household and to atone for
Your
deeds
Eminence.
a household member may have committed to offend Hecate, causing her to withhold her favour from them. It's also the last day of the month according to the lunisolar-based Attic calendar used in ancient Athens, where the time of the dark moon was seen as an in-between liminal time between the months. Now, because they believed the vengeful spirits were roaming the earth, Athenians didn't leave their homes during the Deipnon, and the home afterwards was purified by fumigation and the removal of, quote, leftovers from offerings and sacrifices. The ancient Greeks fumigated their homes by carrying a baked clay censer of incense throughout the house before depositing it at the crossroads or shrine as an offering, and it was never used again because it was considered a, quote, leftover from the ritual. Other such leftovers included incense ashes and the ashes from the sacrifices that their family altar, waste blood, lovely, and any remaining food that have fallen onto the floor. Because as the food fell onto the floor, it was stressed that you don't pick it up.
Blood,
because
lovely.
according to the ritual, it was never to be picked up, as it already passed on to Hecate, and she would then redistribute it amongst the spirits. It's also worth noting that Hecate was worshipped in Byzantium. So according to a tale in the Suda, which is a 10th century Byzantium encyclopedia, she was said to have saved the city from Philip II of Macedon. As Hecate Phosphorus, the star Venus, she is said to have lit the sky during the siege of Philip II in 340 BCE, revealing the attack to its inhabitants. And as a thank you, the Byzantines dedicated a statue to her as the lamp carrier, and Hecate is known as Hecate Lampidephoros. And finally, according to Hesiod of Miletus, there was once a statue of Hecate
no
at
idea
the
what
site
to do
of the
with that
Hippodrome
word.
in Constantinople.
I don't even know what that would be.
And that is my incredibly long essay on the background to Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, in ancient Greece, and a touch of it in ancient Rome. And you know what? Even I did not know when I started this that my name is associated with Hecate. So now I just feel more connected to her. Even though I personally identify with the Grim Reaper more than anything, I'll take being nominally associated with Hecate as well. I feel like that goes with my nature. But yes, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring today's episode. And thank you to my patrons for making today's episode possible. I hope you don't mind if there's another voiceover today. It's just there was a lot of text. And it's much less anxiety-inducing to have a camera rolling whilst you're going through all the hard words that you don't know how to pronounce. But thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.
All right, there's that. I think that's a good background. The perspective is maybe not as decentering of what we consider Western civilization as what I would like, but yeah, honestly, even finding information about Hecate that is like more comprehensive, like, or goes into that much detail was really difficult. So as we have been talking about free speech, who is allowed to have free speech, it's like talking about witchcraft, Hecate, these things are very suppressed. And it's not an accident that she is someone who is espousing more of like these like Western perspectives, is a white woman. That is one of the like few videos that I was able to find that goes into that much detail. So calling that out too. All right. Shall we get into Macbeth? I have my reading gloves. Okay. This is not just to be sassy, although I like that. Gloves can be very classist. So don't like that. But as someone who's very sweaty, this helps to preserve my books from being destroyed. All right. So, where we left off, so we are in Act 2 now. We read Scene 1 yesterday, and Macbeth was talking to Banquo and Fleance and essentially saying, like, oh, is the king asleep yet? Okay. So it's Shakespearean talk to get to that point. And then Macbeth has a monologue that is a very famous one where he is talking about how he still feels guilty, but he's going to go through with it, that he already feels like he's doomed before killing the king, that he is committing the act of regicide, that is one of the ultimate crimes. And it's like, okay, even though Duncan is supposed to be benevolent, I don't think being a king makes you benevolent. But that's my take. It's like perhaps Macbeth would be doing an act of service for many who exist in these lands if he was to have a plan to distribute the wealth and power. But instead he is wanting to be king for his own ambitions. Yay, preserving books. And also, yay, fun opportunity to wear gloves. It looks maybe a little sassy. I like the lil. Putting on gloves so you can take them off to slap someone with them. I love that. I love that. Whether it is consensual slapping, someone is desiring this, or if someone deserves it, you know? Okay. So, now that we have Macbeth being like, I feel guilty, but I guess I'll do it anyway. That's where we left off. We now have Lady Macbeth, which she is often thought of to be engaging in a lot of witchcraft, which, is it any accident that women who are viewed as having ambition, that they are maybe viewed as being witches or categorized as such to take them down? Women who are accumulating too much power, exhibiting what is thought of as male attributes, that it is unnatural when you are a woman growing up in patriarchy or living in patriarchy, that submission is expected. So she is continuing to engage in some of this more like witchy type of language in this scene, particularly at the beginning. All right, enter Lady Macbeth. That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire. Hark! Peace! It was the owl that shrieked, the fatal bellman which gives the sternest good night. He is about it. Okay, footnote. A bell was rung outside the cells of condemned prisoners the night before they were to be executed. So she is talking about the guests being drunk, they're being good hosts, but she's also using it as a way to get them to lower their inhibitions. Shakespeare wrote this, by the way, before the Glencoe massacre that happened in Scotland around like 1692. We learned about that last week. Where, because this was taking place in like early 1600s, like 1608, 1607, for whom the bell tolls. Yep, exactly. Of bells being signals of death, especially after someone dies, of like bells tolling for a funeral. So like all of this bell imagery. It seems like where was I going with the Glencoe massacre? Oh yeah, so like that essentially was the British or the English tricking people in the Scottish Highlands to be hosts. They stay there for a couple of weeks and then at the end of them kill their hosts, which is evil behavior. And also that inspired, if you've watched Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding episode. It also is just a marker of what many people who have imperialist ambitions who are wanting to engage in violent domination do by engaging in bad faith. So, she is, as a host, they are engaging in this behavior of being in bad faith, of welcoming the king and all of his men, the court, into their home. And she is saying that, like, what is making them drunk, it's empowering her. So this is almost like a spell where she is saying, what hath quenched them hath given me fire. That fire language can also evoke images of, like, hellfire. The doors are open, and the surfeited grooms, meaning attendants, do mock their charge with snores. I have drugged their posets, meaning mulled milk and wine, that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. So that was something that witches were also thought to do, is to poison people. Sometimes people would go to, like, medicine ladies or witches to ask for poisons. Poison also being a weapon that is typically thought of as female. Enter Macbeth. Who's there? What ho? And then he exits. Lady Macbeth. Alack, I am afraid they have awaked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark, I laid their daggers ready. He could not miss them. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. So even she is showing some misgivings, where she was like, the only reason I didn't kill him is because he looked like my father when I was sleeping. Which also, the king is supposed to be viewed as the patriarch, the father of all the land. So that kind of manipulative language Shakespeare is appealing to King James at the time. By being like, you are our father, and it is the ultimate crime to want you dead. Enter Macbeth below. These are stage directions written by Shakespeare. I'm not just making that up, by the way. My husband, Macbeth. I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? Lady Macbeth. I heard the owls scream and the crickets cry. Did you not speak? Macbeth. When? Now? As I descended? Aye. Hark, who lies in the second chamber? So now they're feeling very paranoid too. Donalbain. Macbeth looking at his hands. This is a sorry sight. Lady Macbeth. A foolish thought to say a sorry sight. Macbeth. There's one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and address them again to sleep. So also with them praying before they die, that is saving their souls and damning Macbeth. There are two lodged together. Oh, gay. That sounds gay. Ooh. I like the sound of that. Or they also are just, we're having a queer reading, Shakespearean reading, but also they were probably like, they're just soldiers, so let's put them together. They don't get their own room. Macbeth. One cried, God bless us, and amen the other, as they had seen me with these hangman's hands. Hangman's hands, meaning blood-stained. The hangman had to disembowel and quarter his victims. I don't think I knew that. He had to? I knew that was a way for people to be killed, to be executed. Jesus. Shakespearean. Hi, buddy. Welcome. He's the owl that we were hearing. Lady Macbeth mentioned. Hi. Okay, I have to give him a quick pet. I don't know if you can see him. You can just see his ear. Hi, bud. feels extra sassy after eating. But don't we all, you know? We've had a ton of birds around lately. And this is the first time I've seen him do this, but he like almost looked scared, like looking out the window of how many there were, where he was like, they're here for me. We'll see if he jumps up here. He's a sassy boy. All right. See if I can remember where I left off. Oh, the hangman's hands. That's where it was. I actually took off my glove to pet him. I've gotten to the bad habit of just petting the cats with these velvet gloves on, so needless to say, there is a ton of cat hair on them that I like have to regularly lint roll off. Maybe not the best strategy. Okay. One cried, "God bless us," and "Amen," the other, as they had seen me with these hangman hands. Listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say, "God bless us." Lady Macbeth, consider it not so deeply. She's like, stop thinking about it. Oh, there's the other one. Hi, Deanie. Macbeth, but wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most needing of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat. So he's like, oh, I'm fucked. I'm damned. Lady Macbeth, these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. Macbeth, methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth, does murder sleep? The innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, meaning a tangled skein of yarn, a raveled sleeve. The death of each day's life, sore labor's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. Lady Macbeth, what do you mean? She's like, you're losing it. Stop. And he's like, oh, this is bad. I realize that I just killed people, including the king. Not like he hasn't killed people before, to be clear, because he is a warlord, but also going against all of these customs. Hi, Deanie. Hi. Okay, footnote. Second and most nourishing course of a meal. Second or alternative, habit or practice. Okay. Macbeth. Still it cried, sleep no more, to all the house. Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more. Lady Macbeth. Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. Go, get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood. So he brought in the daggers. She's like, why did you do that? You have to leave the evidence there. Macbeth, I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again, I dare not. Lady Macbeth, infirm of purpose, give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of a childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, ill gild the faces of grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. Footnote. Coat as if with gold leaf. Gold was often called red. Oh, I didn't know that. Then she exits. A knock within. Macbeth. Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? While they pluck out mine eyes, will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine make the green one red. So meaning, entirely red. Incarnadine means in turn red. Enter Lady Macbeth. My hands are of your color, but I share to wear a heart so white. Knock within. I hear a knocking. At the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy it then. Your constancy hath left you unattended. Footnote. Your resolve has deserted you. Your constancy, yeah, meaning like, and also your mental stability. Another knock within. So we have 3 knocks so far. Hark, more knocking! Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. Footnote, those who have stayed awake, meaning the watchers. Macbeth, to know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Footnote, it is better that I lose consciousness altogether than face my deed. It's like, okay, well, if you're feeling so guilty, bitch, why did you do it? Big bitch. Knock within. Wake Duncan with thy knocking. I would thou couldst. So again, it's continuing this kind of... So that's the end of the scene. End scene. He crashing out. Yeah, exactly. Where he's like, oh no, I did it. He was feeling guilty before. It is continuing this theme of Eve-like symbolism in the Bible of putting the most guilt on Lady Macbeth, where she's the one to have convinced him, even though he was the one to first think about murdering Duncan, the king, to begin with. McBitch. Just some maybe poor wordplay, but there you go. There is a RuPaul's Drag Race season where they did a play called McBitch, and they loosely based it around Macbeth, some other like Shakespeare plays. Yeah. RuPaul, that's a different. She's problematic in many ways. But it is continuing this theme of the woman who is having too much ambition, who has more knowledge, or who is manipulative, especially like manipulating men, that they are evil. To have ambition in general as a woman is evil. But I think Shakespeare is also acknowledging at the same time, and this is not why he's like considered a proto-feminist, where he's like, well, women can be ambitious, and that maybe she is resorting to these tactics because she is so limited in power, of like that line that she had of saying that like she would kill her own child if she had the chance that Macbeth did. That King James, the audience at the time, may have not viewed it that way, of like, oh, women don't have power. Maybe this is a technique of saying that women wish they had the opportunity of men. But rather it was probably perceived at the time of like this biblical view of being a temptress, engaging in witchcraft herself, and that she was the one to kind of create this whole situation to begin with. But, you know, Macbeth doesn't have to do anything, you know? Like, if he didn't want to, he didn't have to kill the king and also guess there at his home. But, you know, so, like, Macbeth is not a revolutionary. He is not wanting to actually do right by the people of the kingdom, of his own land and estates, because he has multiple. which also means that there are everyday people, the common people who are living on these lands, who are generating all of this wealth, and that he is hoarding it, like all of the aristocrats were doing, and what they still are doing. But that is the end of that scene. Now we are going to see the continued unraveling, the crash out. It will just get even more intense, and we see knocking being viewed as like a bell, a signal of death, like death knocking at the door, so like the Grim Reaper, and how we will be introduced to the Porter character in this next scene, who is the working class, who is making a lot of comments on death. It is very biblical and Christian, but the common people tend to be speaking more in the voice of Shakespeare than many of the other like noble characters. Sometimes they actually like question their leadership around them, and often these were the characters that the nobles would not be able to understand what they were saying, or they would just ignore. So it's not like he was really doing a whole lot to speak truth to power, and why we need to call him out for that shit. Anyway, that is the end of that scene. Tomorrow, I do want to watch that video by Andrewism on his overview of anarchism, as we are continuing to talk about theory and be expanding the frameworks in which we have to view these power structures, oppressive structures. Anyway. Oh, we'll also be doing Banned Book Club. We're reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It is excellent. We are reading to the section of spring. So it's the chapter, see the cat, it goes meow, 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 and come and play, come and play. The kitten will not come and play, play, play. It's like a run-on sentence. But we'll go to the section of spring. If you want to join and discuss or just listen, I'll also be pulling some commentary of this book that we can watch together too. Thank you for being here. It was lovely chatting with you all. Thank you for the engagement, your wise words. Hi. Juniper's like, you're done. Stop. Okay, I appreciate you all. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening. Kitten says meow. I know, that's the chapter we're reading. Juniper. She's like, what, me? Who? Yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.